The message came at 6:12 a.m., just as I was pouring hot water over my Darjeeling leaves in the chipped Wedgwood cup my husband bought me in 1978. Your personal loan for $38,400 has been approved. I don't have a personal loan. I don't even have a car payment. At 74, I live on routine and cinnamon oatmeal, not debt. But the email had my full name, my social security number, my correct address, and it thanked me for my trust. Hello, my dear ones. I'm so glad you're with me today. This one made my blood run cold. If this happened to you, would you ignore it or dig deeper? Tell me below. I didn't ignore it. My hands were steady when I called the number listed in the message. I've learned that panic is a luxury for the unprepared. The young man on the phone sounded rehearsed, but polite. Yes, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore. The loan was approved online yesterday at 8:47 p.m. Yes, the funds were already disbursed. Yes, the account had been verified through personal identification questions. Which questions? I asked. He read them off. Mother's maiden name, first pet, the street I grew up on in Savannah. Every answer correct. I felt something tighten under my ribs. Those weren't answers you could guess. Those were answers you heard at Thanksgiving when someone asked about old stories, and you smiled and told them about your tabby cat, Marbles, who used to sleep in the breadbasket. I did not apply for this loan, I said evenly. Flag it as identity theft, immediately. There was a pause, the kind where someone realizes this is no longer a routine call. He transferred me to the fraud department. I gave my statement, requested a case number, and wrote it down in my little burgundy moleskin notebook. Case ID. Time. Representative name. Extension number. I asked where the funds had been sent. To a checking account ending in 4421, the woman said. That is not my account. No, ma'am. I thanked her, hung up, and sat very still at my kitchen table. The oatmeal had gone cold. Outside, my neighbor's sprinkler clicked rhythmically across his hydrangeas, as if the world had decided this was an ordinary Tuesday. It wasn't. I logged into my own bank portal. Everything looked intact. No new accounts. No outgoing transfers. But when I checked my credit report, because yes, I know how to do that myself, I saw the inquiry from a lender based less than 12 miles from my son Daniel's house. 12 miles is nothing in our town. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Daniel had helped me file taxes before. He had copies of documents. My daughter-in-law, Marissa, once insisted on organizing my paperwork during a Sunday visit. She said I kept things like it was 1953. She laughed when she said it. I laughed too. Now I wasn't laughing. At 10 o'clock, Daniel called me. Mom, hey, you okay? You sounded weird in that voicemail. I hadn't left him a voicemail. I didn't call you, Daniel. A small silence. Not long, just enough. Oh. Huh. Must have been thinking of someone else, he said lightly. You sure you're okay? You get confused with those spam emails sometimes. I spoke with the fraud department this morning, I replied. Someone opened a loan in my name. Another pause. This one heavier. Wow, that's crazy. You sure you didn't click something? No. Well, these companies make mistakes. You know how you are with passwords. I looked at my notebook, at the neat lines of ink documenting every step. I am not careless. I am not confused. I am not a porcelain figurine to be rearranged. I've filed an official report, I said. They're investigating. Daniel exhaled slowly. Mom, maybe don't escalate it yet. Sometimes it's easier to just handle it quietly. Handle it quietly. $40,000 isn't quiet, I answered. When we hung up, I noticed something else in my email, a confirmation message from the lender sent not just to me, but CC'd to another address. It was partially obscured, but I could read enough. M.Whitfield84@Whitfield. Marissa's maiden name. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made myself a fresh cup of tea and took out the old metal file box from under my bed. Inside were copies of my Social Security card, my pension documents, the deed to this house. I counted everything. Nothing missing. But someone didn't need the originals. They just needed the numbers, and someone had them. By noon, I had placed a freeze on all 3 credit bureaus. I updated every password. I added 2-factor authentication to accounts I didn't even use anymore. I called the lender again and requested the full application record, including the IP address used to submit it. "Ma'am, that information may be provided to law enforcement," the representative said carefully. "Good," I replied, "because law enforcement will be involved." At 2:17 p.m., Daniel texted me. "Mom, can we talk in person? Don't do anything drastic." I stared at the word drastic, as if protecting myself were hysteria, as if silence were maturity. I texted back, "You can come by at 5. Then I closed my phone and went outside to trim my rosemary bush. The scent clung to my fingers, sharp and grounding. I have lived through harder things than this. I have buried a husband. I have survived layoffs and cancer scares and raising a son who once set the garage on fire trying to build a go-kart. If someone thought I was too old to fight back, they had forgotten who taught them how to stand in the first place. Daniel arrived at exactly 5, as if punctuality could still pass for integrity. He didn't knock the way he used to, 3 quick taps, and then my name. Now it was a firm, official rap, like he was visiting a client. I opened the door before he could do it again. He walked in without waiting to be invited, kissed the air near my cheek, and sat at the kitchen table. His eyes moved around the room, quick and measuring. He noticed the file box on the counter. He noticed the notebook. "You didn't have to go nuclear over an email, Mom," he began. "I verified it with the lender." He rubbed his jaw. "Companies mess up. Identity theft happens all the time. You filing police reports could make this messy." "I have not filed a police report," I said carefully. "Yet." That word hung between us. He leaned forward. "Look, sometimes banks need documentation fast. If you overreact, it freezes accounts, flags things. It could affect people connected to you." "Connected to me?" "Daniel," I said, folding my hands, "why would my report affect anyone unless they were involved?" His eyes flickered. There it was again. That microscopic hesitation. The kind you'd miss if you weren't watching for it. He smiled, too wide. "You're reading into things. I found an email copied on the loan confirmation. Whitfield, Marissa's maiden name." Silence. He sat back slowly, crossing his arms. "You're accusing my wife now?" "I am observing facts." He stood up and walked to the sink, turning on the faucet though there was nothing in it. The water ran for several seconds before he shut it off. He didn't look at me. "Marissa handles a lot of paperwork," he said. "She's organized. Maybe she used her email to help you with something and it got mixed up." "I did not ask for help." "You don't always remember." "Stop," I said, not raising my voice. "Just one word." He froze. "I've found that calm unsettles people more than shouting. Shouting gives them something to push against. Calm makes them slip." "I manage my own finances," I continued. I know exactly what I apply for and what I don't. This loan was submitted at 8:47 p.m. Where were you last night, Daniel? At home? With Marissa? Yes. And your laptop? He hesitated again. Why does that matter? Because the lender will provide the IP address when law enforcement requests it. There it was. The first crack, a flicker of alarm that he tried to swallow. You really are going to the police? He asked quietly. If necessary. He walked back to the table and placed both palms on the surface, leaning over me. He used to do that when he was 12 and trying to intimidate boys who teased him. It didn't work then either. Mom, he said, lowering his voice. Sometimes families help each other out. Sometimes things get tight. You've always said we're supposed to support each other. Support, not steal. If you needed money, I replied, you could have asked. His jaw tightened. It's not that simple. It never is when someone thinks they won't get caught. The words landed harder than I intended. For a second, something raw flashed across his face. Anger, yes, but also something like resentment that had been fermenting for years. You have this house paid off, he said. Savings? Dad's pension. You sit here clipping herbs and reading while we juggle bills and daycare and… So, you open a loan in my name? I asked. I didn't say that? No, I agreed softly. You didn't. The room felt smaller suddenly. The clock ticked louder. I could hear my own breathing. He straightened up. Just give me a day. Don't escalate this. Let me talk to Marissa. Maybe there's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding doesn't fill out social security fields correctly, I said. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it quickly and flipped it face down. That small movement told me more than anything else. Who is it? I asked. Work. I held out my hand. Show me. Mom, that's ridiculous. If there is nothing to hide, show me. He didn't move. The silence stretched long enough for me to notice something else. His car keys on the counter. Attached to them was a small brass tag from a local credit union, the same credit union listed on my credit report inquiry. I reached for my notebook. What are you doing? He demanded. Documenting this conversation. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're acting paranoid. No, I said, writing the time down. I am acting informed. He grabbed his keys. If you go to the police, you're blowing this out of proportion. You'll hurt your grandkids. Think about them. There it was, the weaponization of love. I am thinking about them, I replied. I am thinking about what example I set if I allow this. He walked toward the door, then stopped. For a moment, I thought he might confess. Instead, he said something colder. You're not as sharp as you think you are. The door closed behind him. I stood alone in my kitchen, staring at the place where he'd been. My chest felt tight, but not from doubt, from clarity. At 5:42 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Daniel. It was the lender. Mrs. Whitmore, the woman said, her voice more serious than before. There's been an attempt to access the loan account again. Someone tried to change the contact phone number. To what number? I asked. She read it aloud. It was Daniel's. I didn't call Daniel back. Instead, I put on my coat, took my handbag, the old leather one with the stubborn clasp, and drove straight to his house. Not to accuse, not yet. Just to observe. Marissa opened the door before I knocked, as if she had been watching through the side window. She wore that tight smile she reserves for PTA meetings and neighbors she secretly dislikes. "Eleanor, this is unexpected." "I was nearby," I lied. "Thought I'd say hello." Daniel was in the living room, pacing. He stopped when he saw me, and for a split second, irritation flared across his face before he masked it. "Mom," he said carefully, "we were just about to call you." "I'm sure." I stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of something citrusy and artificial, like one of those plug-in diffusers meant to suggest cleanliness. On the kitchen island sat an open laptop. Marissa moved quickly, almost too quickly, to close it halfway. "Can I get you tea?" she asked sweetly. "No, thank you." My eyes drifted casually across the counter. There was a stack of mail, a ceramic bowl with keys, a half-eaten slice of focaccia on a plate, and an envelope from the same credit union whose name now made my pulse slow and deliberate. I picked it up. "Oh, that's nothing," Marissa said quickly. "Just a promotional thing." The envelope was already opened. "Promotions don't usually come addressed to the same branch that approved my loan yesterday," I said evenly. Daniel exhaled sharply. "Mom, this is getting ridiculous." I turned the envelope over. On the inside flap, faint but visible, was a printed reference number. I had memorized mine earlier. The first 6 digits matched. Not a coincidence. "Why is your credit union receiving correspondence tied to my application ID?" I asked. Marissa's composure slipped first. "Because we were trying to help you," she snapped. "You've been struggling with bills, and we thought consolidating—" "I have no bills to consolidate," I said. "You don't know everything," she shot back. "You forget things. You leave statements unopened. Daniel worries about you." Daniel stepped in quickly. "She's not saying you're incapable, just that sometimes it's easier if we manage things." "Manage," I repeated softly. I walked past them and into the small home office near the hallway. They didn't stop me, which told me they were more afraid of what I might already know than what I might find. On the desk was a shredder. Beside it, a small pile of paper strips that hadn't been emptied yet. I picked up a few fragments. My name, part of my social security number. I felt something shift inside me then. Not grief, not even anger. Something colder. Something final. Marissa's voice followed me. "That's private, Eleanor." "Yes," I agreed. "It is." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "We were going to tell you." "When?" I asked. He didn't answer. "After the money cleared?" I continued. "After you paid off whatever you needed? Or after I noticed my credit ruined?" "You don't understand the pressure we're under," Marissa burst out. "Medical bills, the twins' tuition. You sit in that quiet house of yours with your antique china and your little herb garden." "And because I have stability," I interrupted calmly, "you decided it was yours." Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It was just temporary. We were going to pay it back." "With what?" I asked. "Another loan in someone else's name?" He flinched. There it was. Not just desperation. Pattern. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't look at it. I already knew it would be the fraud department or perhaps the credit bureau confirming the freeze. "I gave you a day," I said. "You used it to try to change the phone number on the loan account." Marissa's eyes widened. "You're tracking that?" "Yes." Daniel looked at her sharply. "You said they wouldn't notice." "They weren't supposed to," she hissed back. Silence. Real silence this time. No pretense. No careful phrasing. I walked back into the kitchen and set the envelope down precisely where I found it. "You had access to my paperwork," I said. "You answered security questions only family would know. You routed funds to an account you control, and then you tried to alter the contact information once I reported it." Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "Mom?" "No," I said gently but firmly. "Do not call me that right now." Marissa folded her arms. "So what? You're going to send your own son to jail?" "I am going to protect myself," I replied. Daniel's face hardened. "If you involve the police, this blows up everything. The kids will find out. The neighborhood will find out. You'll be the reason this family falls apart." I looked at him for a long moment. The boy I raised, the man standing in front of me, and the stranger I was meeting for the first time all layered over each other. "This family," I said quietly, "fell apart the moment you decided I was expendable." I walked toward the door. Behind me, Marissa's voice turned sharp again. "You're overreacting. At your age, stress like this isn't good for you." I paused at the threshold. "At my age," I said, without turning around, "I have nothing left to be afraid of." I stepped outside into the cool evening air. My phone buzzed again. This time, I looked. A notification from my bank. A second inquiry had just been submitted under my name 5 minutes ago, from the same IP address. I didn't go back inside. I stood on their porch, staring at the notification on my phone while the porch light flickered above me. A second inquiry. Same lender network. Same timestamp window. They weren't panicking. They were doubling down. Inside, I could hear muffled voices. Sharp. Urgent. The kind of whispers that aren't meant to be whispers. I walked to my car slowly, deliberately, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Once inside, I locked the doors and called the fraud department again. "There's been another inquiry," I said calmly, 5 minutes ago. The woman on the line inhaled softly. "Yes, I see that. It was flagged immediately due to your freeze." "Good. Ma'am, the IP address associated with both attempts has now been marked as suspicious activity. Can you tell me the general location?" There was a pause. "It's within your residential zip code." "I know." When I hung up, I didn't drive home. I drove to the local police station instead. The building hasn't changed in 30 years. Same brick exterior, same faded flag. I parked under the streetlight and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. My pulse was steady. Not because I felt brave, because I felt certain. Inside, a young officer directed me to a small desk. I introduced myself, gave my age, and explained the situation without dramatics. Just facts, dates, times, case numbers. I handed over my notebook. He flipped through the pages, eyebrows lifting slightly at the level of detail. "You documented everything," he said. "Yes." "Do you know who might be responsible?" "I have suspicions," I replied, "but I would prefer the evidence to speak." He nodded, appreciating that. I provided the email screenshot with the Whitfield address, the partial reference number from the envelope, the phone number that had attempted to change the account contact, Daniel's number. I even mentioned the shredded documents in the home office. "Did you take any of the shredded material?" he asked. "No, but it's still in their trash bin." That earned me a longer look. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this amount qualifies as felony fraud. If your suspicions are correct, this could lead to arrest." "I understand. Are you prepared for that?" Prepared. I thought of Daniel at 5 years old, asleep on my chest. Of Marissa holding my newborn grandchildren in the hospital. of Sunday dinners with lemon chicken and porcelain plates. I did not prepare for this, I said quietly. But I will not carry debt for someone else's crime. He typed steadily, filing the official report. Once it was logged, he gave me a copy and a case number. Different from the lender's. This one carried weight. Given the repeated attempts today, he added, we may move quickly. I thanked him and stepped back outside. As I reached my car, my phone rang. Daniel. I answered. What did you do? He demanded immediately. I protected myself. You went to the police, didn't you? I filed a report, yes. He let out a harsh laugh. You really want to destroy us. You destroyed trust, I replied. I'm simply addressing the consequences. You think they're going to believe you over us? He snapped. You're elderly, confused, emotional. There it was again, the narrative they'd already rehearsed. I have documentation, I said evenly. Do you? Silence. Then more quietly. Mom, please, we can fix this. I'll cancel everything. I'll pay fees. Just withdraw the report. It doesn't work like that, I answered. Behind him, I heard Marissa's voice, frantic. Tell her to stop. Tell her they can't prove anything. They could prove plenty. Daniel, I said, my voice steady as steel. An hour ago, someone used the same IP address to try again. After I warned you, that is not a misunderstanding. That is intent. He didn't respond. I will not speak to you again tonight, I continued. If you have something to say, you may say it through an attorney. You wouldn't, he whispered. I ended the call. The night air felt sharper now, cleaner, like something had been cut away. As I drove home, I passed the small bakery on Main Street, the one that sells cardamom rolls on Thursdays. Life continued as usual. People laughed inside restaurants. Porch lights glowed warm against the dark. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I saw something that made me pause. My mailbox was open. I always close it. I stepped out of the car slowly and walked toward it. Inside, nothing but a single envelope addressed to me in Daniel's handwriting. I hadn't told him I was coming home. I didn't touch the envelope right away. I stood there in the quiet of my driveway, the porch light humming faintly above me, and stared at Daniel's handwriting. I would recognize it anywhere, slanted slightly to the right, letters pressed too hard into the paper. He always wrote like he was trying to make the words permanent. I opened the mailbox and took it out carefully, as if it might burn. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper, folded twice. Mom, please don't do this. We were going to fix it. The money isn't even spent yet. We just needed time. If this becomes official, it changes everything. Think about the kids. Think about holidays. We can still handle this privately. I'll come over tonight. No apology, no admission, just strategy. At the bottom, in smaller handwriting, Marissa's, sharper and more angular, escalating. This will only make you look unstable. I read that line twice. Unstable. At 74, I've balanced checkbooks by hand, navigated probate court, and once assembled a Scandinavian flat-pack armoire without instructions. But now I was unstable because I refused to absorb a felony quietly. I folded the paper back along its original creases and slipped it into my handbag. Evidence. Inside the house, everything felt the same, the ticking clock, the faint scent of rosemary from earlier. But I felt different. Lighter, almost. Like denial had been a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. My phone buzzed again. A text from Marissa this time. Eleanor, Please be rational. These systems are complicated. You could be misunderstanding what happened. I typed back. The police understand it very clearly. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. You're going to regret this. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked to my small desk near the window and powered up my laptop. I logged into my bank again. All accounts secure. Freeze confirmed. Fraud alert active. I checked my credit monitoring dashboard. Another attempted soft inquiry had been blocked 15 minutes ago. They were still trying. That told me something important. They didn't believe I would follow through. At 8:12 p.m., headlights swept across my living room wall. Daniel's SUV. He didn't knock this time. He rang the bell and kept his finger on it a fraction too long. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "We need to talk," he said, voice tight. "We can talk here." He glanced over my shoulder. "Can I come in?" "No." He swallowed. The night air was cold, and his breath fogged faintly. "Mom, you're spiraling," he began. "You've always been intense, but this is..." "Intense?" I repeated calmly. "Because I reported identity theft?" He ran a hand through his hair again. I noticed how tired he looked. Not remorseful. Tired of managing the situation. "We needed liquidity," he said suddenly. "Just short term. The interest rate was good because of your credit. We were going to transfer it to our name after a few months." "You can't transfer fraud," I said. He shifted his weight. "You don't get it. Banks don't care about families. They just care about payments." "And you assumed I would quietly make them," I replied. He didn't deny it. Behind him, another car door slammed. Marissa stepped out from the passenger side and walked up the driveway, arms folded tightly across her chest. "This is absurd," she said without greeting. "Do you know what an investigation like this does? Employers see this. Background checks flag things." "They should," I answered. "You're willing to jeopardize your son's career over paperwork?" "I'm unwilling to jeopardize my future over theft." She let out a sharp laugh. "You think they'll arrest someone over this? It's a family misunderstanding." "The officer did not use the word misunderstanding," I said evenly. "He used the word felony." Daniel shot her a look, fear, now unmistakable. "You actually filed it as criminal?" he asked. "Yes." Marissa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you push this, we will have to defend ourselves. We have emails. We have proof you agreed to financial help." "I agreed to nothing," I said. "You forget conversations," she pressed. "You get emotional. We could easily demonstrate diminished capacity." There it was. The threat behind the word unstable. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger. Resolution. "If you attempt to question my capacity," I said quietly, "you will find I have already scheduled a cognitive assessment next week with my physician, voluntarily." Daniel's eyes widened. "You did what?" I anticipated that angle. For the first time, neither of them had a response ready. A car slowed at the end of the street, headlights washing over us briefly before continuing on. The neighborhood was quiet. Watching, perhaps. Daniel's phone buzzed in his hand. He glanced at it and went pale. "What?" Marissa demanded. He didn't answer, just handed her the phone. Her face drained of color, too. I watched them both. "What is it?" I asked calmly. Daniel looked up at me, voice barely above a whisper. "They just froze our joint account." For a moment, none of us spoke. The porch light flickered again, humming softly, and in that thin yellow glow, I watched my son process something he had never truly believed would happen. Consequences. "What do you mean froze?" I asked evenly. Daniel swallowed. Our checking account. It's locked. There's a notice saying it's under review for suspicious activity. Marissa grabbed the phone from him and scrolled frantically. "This is because of you," she snapped at me. "You triggered internal flags. Everything's connected." "Yes," I replied. "Fraud systems tend to connect things." She looked like she wanted to scream, but instead, she turned on Daniel. "I told you we should have waited." "You said it was fine," he shot back. I said not after she noticed. I let them unravel for a few seconds before speaking. "You attempted another inquiry after I confronted you," I said. "Did you think that would go unnoticed?" Daniel ran both hands over his face. "We were trying to secure a backup. If the first one got delayed—" "Delayed?" I repeated. He stopped. The word had slipped out too naturally. Marissa's voice dropped lower now, colder. "You could still fix this. Withdraw the complaint. Tell them you were mistaken." "I was not mistaken." "They'll ask why you changed your mind," she pressed. "You can say you misunderstood the application process." "I did not misunderstand," I said. Daniel stepped closer to me, desperation edging into his tone. "Mom, listen. Once this goes further, it's not just about money. It's criminal. There will be records. Court. Headlines if someone picks it up. The kids. You used the kids when you needed leverage," I interrupted quietly. "Do not use them now." He flinched. Behind them, the neighbor across the street opened her curtains slightly. I could see the faint outline of her silhouette. Word travels fast in small neighborhoods, but truth travels faster when there's paperwork. Marissa suddenly straightened. "Fine," she said. "If you want to play this game, let's play it. We have emails where you sent us copies of your tax returns last year." "Yes." "You gave us access to your financial information. For filing assistance, not borrowing rights." She crossed her arms. "You're splitting hairs." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm distinguishing between trust and theft." Daniel's phone buzzed again. Another notification. His jaw tightened as he read it. "What now?" I asked. "They want us to come in tomorrow," he muttered. "The bank." "In person. For what purpose?" I asked. They said, "Clarification of linked accounts." Linked. That word landed heavily. Marissa's eyes snapped to me. "You reported our account too?" "I reported fraudulent routing," I said. "If your account received funds tied to my identity, that is part of the investigation." Daniel let out a low curse under his breath. "This is insane." "No," I said quietly. "This is traceable." For the first time, fear outweighed arrogance in his expression. Real fear. The kind that comes when someone realizes the system they thought they could outmaneuver is bigger than they imagined. Marissa tried one last angle. Her voice softened artificially. "Eleanor," she said, stepping closer again, "families recover from mistakes. You don't have to destroy everything. We can pay you back quietly. No one else has to know." I held her gaze steadily. "Everyone already knows," I said. "The lender, the credit bureaus, law enforcement, and now your bank." Daniel looked like he might sit down on the driveway. "You actually want to see us arrested?" he asked hoarsely. "I want to see this stopped," I replied. There was a difference. A large one. Headlights appeared at the end of the street again, but this time they slowed, much slower. A vehicle turned onto our block deliberately. Daniel noticed it too. His shoulders stiffened. The car rolled forward, unhurried. Marissa's voice dropped to a whisper. "Daniel?" The vehicle pulled up along the curb, engine idling. I didn't move. Daniel looked at me, panic finally breaking through his composure. "What did you tell them?" he asked. "Exactly what happened," I answered. The car doors opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped out of the car. Not hurried, not aggressive, just purposeful. Daniel's breath shortened beside me. Marissa's fingers dug into his arm so tightly I could see the tension in her knuckles. "Evening," the older officer said, walking up the driveway. He looked at me first. "Mrs. Whitmore?" "Yes. We received additional activity alerts connected to your report. I assumed you might." Daniel tried to speak, but his voice came out thinner than usual. "Officers, this is a misunderstanding. Family matter." The younger officer glanced between us. "Sir, are you Daniel Whitmore?" Daniel hesitated a fraction too long. "Yes." "And this is your residence?" "Yes." The older officer nodded slightly. "We'll need to ask you a few questions regarding a financial application submitted under Mrs. Whitmore's identity." Marissa stepped forward immediately. "This is absurd. She's elderly. She gets confused." "We were helping her consolidate accounts." The officer looked at me again. "Ma'am, do you feel confused about your report?" "No," I said calmly. "I have documentation." I handed him copies I'd printed earlier. Email confirmations, timestamps, the attempted phone number change, the freeze confirmations. He scanned them quickly. Daniel shifted on his feet. "We can explain—" "Please do," the officer said evenly. There was a long pause. Marissa spoke first. "Eleanor gave us access to her information last year for taxes. We handled paperwork. We may have initiated something on her behalf to improve her financial positioning." "Without her signature?" the officer asked. "It was online," she replied quickly. "And without her knowledge?" "We were going to tell her." The younger officer typed something into a small device. "Sir, were the loan proceeds deposited into an account you control?" Daniel's silence answered before he did. The older officer's tone shifted slightly, not harsh, but firm. "Mr. Whitmore, at this point we are investigating potential identity theft and fraud over a threshold amount. Continued activity was recorded after the initial complaint." Marissa's head snapped toward Daniel. "You said they couldn't trace it that fast." Daniel shot her a look of warning. Too late. The younger officer glanced up. "Trace what, ma'am?" "No, I mean—" Daniel tried again. "Look, we were under pressure. It was temporary. We planned to repay—" "Repayment doesn't negate unauthorized use," the officer replied. I watched my son's face carefully. The arrogance was gone now. What remained was calculation and fear. The older officer turned to me. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you requesting to proceed with formal charges?" The question landed heavy in the night air. Daniel looked at me like a drowning man. "Mom, please." Marissa's voice cut in, sharp and urgent. "If you do this, you will not see your grandchildren again." There it was. The final card. For a brief second, my chest tightened, not because I doubted the truth, but because I knew the cost of it. The porch light flickered again above us, buzzing softly. I straightened my shoulders. "Yes," I said clearly. "I want this investigated fully." The older officer nodded once. "Mr. Whitmore, Mrs. Whitmore," he said to Daniel and Marissa, "we'll need you to come down to the station for questioning." Marissa's composure shattered. "You can't arrest us over paperwork." "At this time," the officer replied evenly, "you are being detained for further inquiry." Daniel stepped back instinctively. "This is insane. She's my mother. And she is the victim listed on the report, the younger officer said. The neighborhood had gone completely still. Curtains shifted subtly. Someone's porch light turned on down the street. Daniel looked at me one last time. You're choosing this over us. No, I answered quietly. You chose this. The officers guided them toward the patrol car. Not with force, but with finality. As the car doors closed, Marissa's eyes met mine through the window. Not pleading now. Furious. The engine started. I stood alone in my driveway as the vehicle pulled away slowly. My phone buzzed again in my hand. A new notification from the lender. Fraud case escalated. Law enforcement involvement confirmed. The patrol car disappeared at the end of the street, its red taillights fading into the dark like a slow exhale. I didn't move for several seconds. The neighborhood was quiet again. Too quiet. Curtains shifted back into place. Porch lights clicked off one by one. I walked inside and locked the door carefully. My house felt larger now, emptier, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. I set my handbag on the kitchen table and removed the folded letter Daniel had left in the mailbox. I smoothed it flat and slid it into a clear plastic sleeve. Evidence. I labeled it with the date and time. My handwriting was steady. At 9:43 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Whitmore? A calm male voice asked. Yes. This is Officer Ramirez. Your son and daughter-in-law are at the station. They've requested counsel. We're processing documentation. We may need you tomorrow to formally identify specific materials related to your financial records. I'll be there, I said. There was a slight pause. Ma'am, I understand this isn't easy. No, I replied quietly. It isn't. After the call ended, I poured myself a small glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. My reflection in the dark window looked older than this morning, but also sharper. Defined. At 10:07 p.m., another notification arrived. A freeze confirmation from the credit union account ending in 4421, the account that had received the loan funds. It was officially under investigation. I opened my laptop and logged into my credit monitoring dashboard again. A detailed alert now displayed a timeline of events: initial application, approval, fund transfer, attempted modification of contact number, second inquiry, and IP flagging. The IP address was listed in full. I copied it down. It matched the general location of Daniel's house. I leaned back slowly in my chair. They hadn't even used a public network. They'd used their home connection. Confidence can make people careless. My phone vibrated again. This time it was a text from an unfamiliar number. Grandma, what's going on? Mom's crying. My heart clenched. It was Olivia, my oldest granddaughter. 14. Old enough to sense something serious. Too young to understand all of it. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. I love you. I'm handling something important. We'll talk soon. 3 dots appeared. Dad says you're confused. I closed my eyes briefly. I'm not confused, I typed back. I'm protecting myself. No response came after that. I set the phone down carefully. At 11:02 p.m., Daniel called again. I let it ring once. Twice. On the third ring, I answered. His voice was different now. Lower. Controlled. They're talking about charges, he said. Yes. You could still tell them it was authorized. It wasn't. He inhaled sharply. You're going to tear this family apart. No, I replied quietly. I am refusing to let it be torn quietly. Silence. Then softer. Mom? Please, just say you misunderstood. I looked around my kitchen, the ceramic jar of flour, the rosemary plant by the window, the clock ticking steadily forward. I understood perfectly, I said. There was a long pause on the line. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its edge entirely. They're saying because there were repeated attempts after the initial complaint. It shows intent. Yes. And because of the amount, it's felony level. Yes. He swallowed, audibly. Marissa says we can fight it. You can try, I answered. Another silence. Then something I hadn't expected. I didn't think you'd actually do it, he admitted. That landed harder than anything else. You didn't think I'd protect myself? I asked. I thought you'd handle it quietly, like always. Like always. I felt the weight of that sentence settle into something solid inside me. I am not handling this quietly, I said. He didn't argue. I'll call you tomorrow, he murmured. I will speak to you through legal channels, I replied. The line went dead. I sat there in the dim kitchen light for a long time after that. Not crying, not shaking, just breathing. At 11:48 p.m., one final alert came through. Temporary hold placed on suspect accounts pending further investigation. I turned off the kitchen light and walked slowly down the hallway toward my bedroom. For the first time all day, I allowed myself to feel something close to exhaustion, but not regret. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. without an alarm. For years, I've risen early out of habit, first for Daniel when he was small, then for my husband's commute, and now simply because silence belongs to the morning. But this silence felt different, charged. I brewed coffee instead of tea, stronger, darker. I added a pinch of cardamom, something I rarely do unless I need grounding. At 7:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Officer Ramirez. Mrs. Whitmore, good morning. We'll need you at the station at 10 to review recovered materials and confirm certain documentation. Recovered? I asked. Yes, ma'am. I didn't press further. At 8:04 a.m., a voicemail came through from Marissa. Her voice was brittle. You've made your point. The bank is reviewing everything. The kids are asking questions. If you care about them at all, you'll fix this. Fix this. I deleted the voicemail, but kept the audio file saved. Another entry in the folder on my desktop labeled simply Timeline. At 9:47, I drove to the station. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. Officer Ramirez met me in a small interview room with beige walls and a single table. On that table were several items sealed in clear evidence bags. My breath slowed. During preliminary questioning, he explained, we obtained consent to review devices associated with the application. We also secured documentation from their residence. He laid the first bag in front of me. Inside was a printed copy of my credit report, with handwritten notes in the margins. My interest rate circled. A calculation scribbled beside it, a line that read, "She won't notice if autopay is set." My chest tightened, not with shock, but with confirmation. The second bag contained shredded paper strips, reconstructed partially. My name visible. Portions of my social security number. The third bag held a small notebook. Daniel's. Officer Ramirez opened it carefully and turned it toward me. On one page, loan under mom's credit. $38,000 moved to Joint Act 4421. Refi later? If questioned, then say consolidation. Help no ambiguity, no misunderstanding. Can you confirm this is your son's handwriting? He asked. I studied it closely. The pressure marks. The way he forms the letter M. Yes, I said quietly. And the credit report? Did you provide this copy to them? No. He nodded slowly. Ma'am, he said gently, given the documentation and repeated attempts after warning, the case will likely proceed formally. I understand. He hesitated, then added, your daughter-in-law suggested cognitive impairment on your part. We've noted that claim. Your documentation contradicts it. I allowed myself a small breath of satisfaction. I have an appointment scheduled for voluntary assessment, I said, for my own records. He gave a slight nod of respect. At 10:38 a.m., as I was leaving the station, my phone vibrated again. A call from Daniel's number. I didn't answer. A text followed. They're charging us. I stopped walking for a moment. Then another message. This isn't what we thought would happen. Number. It wasn't. I stepped outside into the bright late morning sun. The air felt crisp, clear. As I reached my car, Officer Ramirez stepped out behind me. One more thing, he said. There's an additional detail. Yes? The funds from the loan were partially transferred out of their account last night, before the freeze completed. To where? I asked. A secondary account under a different name. I felt something cold move through me. Whose name? I asked. He checked his notes. Olivia Whitmore. My granddaughter. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. Olivia? I repeated. Yes, ma'am, Officer Ramirez said carefully. A custodial savings account was opened recently. Her name is listed as primary beneficiary. The transfer occurred approximately 23 minutes before the freeze finalized. I felt the air thin around me. Is she legally able to access it? I asked. No. She's a minor. The account would be controlled by a guardian. Daniel. Or Marissa. The implication was clear. They hadn't just used my credit. They'd tried to move part of the money into an account under their daughter's name, shielded by age. That complicates things, the officer added. It clarifies them, I replied quietly. He studied my face, perhaps expecting tears. Instead, I felt something far more steady. Resolve. Will she face consequences? I asked. No. She's not considered responsible. The account activity will be reviewed as part of the broader case. I nodded once. Thank you. I got into my car and closed the door slowly. For a long moment, I simply sat there, staring at the steering wheel. They had used her name. That was the part that hurt. Not the money. Not the lies. The fact that they were willing to weave their daughter into a financial scheme as insulation. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. I answered this time. What did you tell them? He demanded immediately, voice hoarse. Exactly what happened. They're saying the transfer to Olivia's account makes it look worse. It does, I said evenly. That was just temporary, he snapped. It was a placeholder. We were going to move it back once things settled. You moved stolen funds into your daughter's name. It wasn't stolen, he insisted weakly. It was borrowed. Without consent, I replied. That is theft. There was breathing on the other end, ragged now. You don't understand how tight things are, he muttered. Medical bills, credit cards. We were drowning. And your solution, I said quietly, was to push me under first. Silence, then softer. They're talking about fraud charges, Mom. Real ones. Yes. They said the notes they found make it premeditated. Yes. A long pause. You read them? He asked. Yes. Another silence, heavier this time. You went through my things, he whispered. The police did, I corrected. After I filed a report. His breath hitched faintly. Marissa thinks if you tell them you were considering helping us, it changes intent. I was not considering it. She says you've always supported us. I have, I said. Voluntarily. The distinctions seemed to land. They froze Olivia's account too, he added quietly. I know. She's scared. So am I replied. He didn't respond to that. Daniel, I said, keeping my voice steady. Did Olivia know? No, he said quickly. Of course not. I closed my eyes briefly. Good. That account will be untangled, I continued, but this will not disappear. He let out a long, uneven breath. You really won't fix it. I am fixing it, I said. Properly. There was nothing left for him to argue. I have to go, he muttered. Yes. When the call ended, I drove home slowly. Every stoplight felt deliberate, every turn heavier. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something I hadn't seen earlier. A small car parked across the street. Unfamiliar. Inside, a woman sat in the driver's seat with a folder on her lap. When she saw me looking, she stepped out and approached. Mrs. Whitmore? She asked. Yes. I'm from Child Protective Services. We need to speak with you regarding a financial account opened in your granddaughter's name. I didn't invite her inside immediately. The words Child Protective Services seemed to echo longer than they should have. I'm not sure why you'd need to speak with me, I said evenly. She held up her folder. A financial account was opened in Olivia Whitmore's name. Funds were transferred into it under circumstances currently under investigation. We're conducting a standard welfare assessment. Standard. Nothing about this felt standard. You believe she's in danger? I asked. We're assessing whether financial exploitation or coercion is involved, she replied carefully, including potential misuse of a minor's identity. I stepped aside then and allowed her into my living room. We sat across from each other. She took notes as I explained, clearly, chronologically, what had happened. The fraudulent loan, the second inquiry, the transfer into Olivia's custodial account. Did Olivia have any knowledge of this? She asked. No, I said firmly. I asked directly. And her parents? They claimed it was temporary. She made a small notation. Do you believe your granddaughter is being used to shield financial misconduct? The question was clinical, precise. Yes, I answered. She studied my face carefully, as though searching for confusion. She didn't find it. Your son's attorney has already contacted us, she added. Of course he had. What was the claim? I asked. That you are misinterpreting financial assistance and that your cognitive health is in question. I nodded slowly. I anticipated that. Her pen paused. You anticipated it? I have a voluntary cognitive evaluation scheduled next week. I also provided law enforcement with detailed documentation. She closed the folder briefly and leaned back. You understand that if misuse of a minor's identity is confirmed, it escalates the situation significantly. Yes. She hesitated, then asked more softly, Are you prepared for the impact that could have on your family? The room felt still, heavy. Before I answered, I felt the weight of that question, not legally, but emotionally. And this is where I want to pause for just a moment. This is the moment everything shifts, isn't it? A grandmother standing at the line between family and justice. If you were in Eleanor's place right now, would you stay silent or step forward? Tell me in the comments. I looked back at the woman in front of me. My granddaughter deserves a future unburdened by fraud, I said quietly. If that means the truth causes discomfort, then so be it. She nodded once. CPS will interview the children separately, she said. We'll determine whether this was an isolated financial event or part of a broader pattern. Pattern. That word lingered. Officer Ramirez mentioned there were notes recovered, she added. If those indicate premeditation involving the minor's account, that will factor into our report. They do, I replied. Her eyes sharpened slightly. When she stood to leave, she handed me a card. If anyone pressures you to retract your statement, she said, notify us. Retaliation in these cases is taken seriously. I will, I answered. After she left, the house felt different again. Not emptier this time, but clearer. Layers were being stripped away. Truth had a way of disinfecting rot, even when it stung. My phone buzzed, a message from Daniel's attorney. We request that you reconsider pursuing charges. A family mediation could resolve this without permanent damage. Permanent damage. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I placed the phone face down on the table. Some damage had already been permanent. The next morning began with a knock on my door at 8:16 a.m. Not Daniel, not Marissa. 2 detectives. They weren't in uniform this time. Plain clothes, leather folders, calm expressions that meant something had shifted from inquiry to procedure. Mrs. Whitmore, one of them said, showing a badge. We have additional updates regarding the custodial account. I stepped aside and let them in. We sat at the kitchen table again, the same table where I'd once helped Daniel with math homework. The same table where I'd hosted birthday cakes and Thanksgiving pies and arguments about curfews. Now it held printed transaction logs. The transfer into your granddaughter's account was structured in 2 smaller amounts, the detective explained, below certain internal reporting thresholds. I felt my jaw tighten slightly. That suggests intent to avoid immediate detection. Yes, I said quietly. He slid another document toward me. This was drafted on Daniel's laptop 2 days before the loan was approved. I read it. Contingency plan. If flagged, move $12,000 to Olivia Savings. Claim college prep. Shift remainder to cover card debt. There it was. Not desperation in the moment. Planning. Do you recognize this? The detective asked. Yes. Did you at any point authorize your son or daughter-in-law to open a line of credit in your name? No. Did you authorize any transfer of funds into Olivia's account? No. He nodded once and made a notation. The second detective leaned forward slightly. We also recovered deleted messages between Daniel and Marissa, discussing timing the application for when you typically watch television and wouldn't check email. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course, you understand, he continued carefully, that misuse of a minor's identity combined with financial fraud elevates the charges. I do. And you wish to proceed? Yes. There was no hesitation in my voice now. None left. After they left, I sat at the table for a long time. The word that kept repeating in my mind wasn't betrayal. It was calculation. They hadn't acted in panic. They had acted in stages: application, transfer, backup inquiry, secondary transfer. Narrative preparation, confused, unstable, misunderstanding. I stood and walked to the window. The rosemary bush swayed lightly in the breeze outside. Ordinary morning, ordinary light. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Daniel, it was Olivia. Grandma CPS came to school today. I felt my chest tighten. They asked me about the savings account. I told them I didn't know about it. I typed carefully. You did exactly right. You're not in trouble. A pause. Dad says you're trying to hurt us. I stared at that sentence. Then I responded. I'm trying to protect what's right. Even when it's hard. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then one final message. Are you mad at me? That one hit deeper than anything else had. Never, I typed back. I love you. No reply came after that. At 12:34 p.m., Daniel called again. I let it go to voicemail. His message came through seconds later. They're offering a plea arrangement, he said, voice tight. If you agree not to pursue civil damages, they'll consider reduced charges. We'd admit to unauthorized use, not full fraud. Unauthorized use. Such a gentle phrase for something so deliberate. He continued, if you push for full prosecution, it gets worse. For everyone. I listened to the message twice before deleting it. Then I opened my notebook and wrote one line. They want containment, not accountability. At 2:10 p.m., my attorney called. Yes, I had hired one that morning. Eleanor, she said, her voice calm and direct. The documentation is strong. The involvement of a minor account significantly limits their room to argue misunderstanding. I assumed as much. There will be pressure to settle quietly, she added. I'm aware. Are you emotionally prepared for this to go to court? I looked around my quiet kitchen, at the clock, at the window, at the chair Daniel once sat in. Yes, I said. After we ended the call, I made myself a sandwich I didn't taste and sat back down at the table. For the first time since this began, I allowed myself to acknowledge the truth plainly. My son had not thought I would act. He had built a plan around my silence. And that plan was collapsing. The formal charges were filed 3 days later. Fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation involving a minor account. I learned about it not from Daniel, but from the public court record notification that landed in my email at 9:02 a.m. Clear, official, irreversible. At 9:17, Daniel called. I answered. They filed it, he said flatly. Yes. You didn't even try to stop it. It wasn't mine to stop, I replied. Once reported, it became a matter of law. You could have told them you didn't want to cooperate. I did cooperate, I said calmly. Silence. Then anger rising. You're enjoying this? No, I said quietly. I'm enduring it. That seemed to unsettle him more than if I'd shouted. You've humiliated us, he went on. Neighbors are talking. My supervisor asked questions. You humiliated yourself, I answered. He inhaled sharply. Marissa's parents are threatening to cut us off. They think this makes us look criminal. I didn't respond to that. Because they were. He lowered his voice. The plea offer is still open. If you agree not to pursue civil damages, they'll recommend probation instead of potential jail time. And if I refuse, it goes to trial. There it was, the dividing line. I'm not seeking revenge, I said slowly. But I will not rewrite what happened. You're being stubborn. No, I replied. I'm being consistent. A long silence followed. Then something different entered his voice. Not anger this time. Fear. They're saying the notes make it premeditated. That the transfer under Olivia's name shows intent to conceal. Yes. I didn't think it would go this far, he admitted quietly. You thought I'd absorb it, I said. He didn't deny it. You've always fixed things, he continued. Smoothed them over, quietly handled it. I fixed scraped knees, I said softly. Not crimes. Another silence. Mom, if I go to court, this follows me forever. And if I had stayed silent, I replied, it would have followed me. The line went quiet again. When he spoke next, the sharpness was gone entirely. I don't know how we got here, he murmured. I do, I said. And I did. Not in one decision, not in one desperate moment, in layers, in small rationalizations, in the assumption that I would never push back. After the call ended, I drove to my attorney's office. She laid out the options clearly. If I agreed not to pursue civil recovery beyond restitution, the prosecution might support reduced sentencing. If I insisted on full accountability, the case would likely proceed to court with all documentation presented. The evidence is strong, she repeated, especially the written plan and the minor account transfer. I nodded. Emotionally, she added, this will divide your family. It already has, I said. When I left her office, I didn't drive home immediately. I stopped at the bakery on Main Street instead. The woman behind the counter smiled warmly. Cardamom roll today? Yes, I said. I sat by the window with my coffee and pastry, watching people pass by. Ordinary lives, ordinary choices. My phone buzzed. A message from Olivia. Dad says we might move. I closed my eyes briefly before replying. Wherever you are, you can always call me. A few seconds later, Mom's crying a lot. I typed carefully. Adults sometimes cry when consequences feel heavy. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. No response. I finished my coffee slowly. By the time I returned home, I had made my decision. I called my attorney. I will not pursue additional civil damages, I said. Restitution only. But I will not interfere with prosecution. She paused. You're certain? Yes. I would not destroy them beyond what they had done, but I would not shield them either. That evening, Daniel texted. They're offering probation if we accept the plea. I stared at the message for a long time before answering. That choice is yours. He didn't reply. For the first time since this began, the outcome was no longer in my hands. It was in theirs. They accepted the plea. I found out on a gray Tuesday afternoon when my attorney called. Daniel and Marissa have agreed to plead to reduced felony charges, she said. Probation, mandatory restitution, financial monitoring, and required counseling. No jail time, provided they comply. I stood by the window as she spoke, watching a delivery truck crawl past my house. And Olivia? I asked. The custodial account has been dissolved. Funds recovered. No record attached to her. I closed my eyes briefly. Good. The court date is set for formal entry next week, she continued. You'll need to be present to confirm restitution terms. I will be. After we ended the call, I sat down slowly. It wasn't victory. It wasn't relief. It was something quieter. Finality. My phone buzzed 15 minutes later. Daniel. I answered. We signed it, he said. I know. His voice sounded thinner than I'd ever heard it. Stripped down. They're putting us on supervised probation, financial audits, counseling. We have to disclose any new credit applications. Yes. They made us admit to intent. I didn't respond immediately. They said because of the notes and the transfers. There was no way to frame it as confusion, he continued. No, I said quietly. There wasn't. Silence. Then softer. You didn't fight for us. I chose not to fight against the truth, I replied. He exhaled slowly. Marissa thinks you'll regret this. I regret that it happened, I said. Not that it stopped. Another silence. We're selling the house, he added. I hadn't expected that. To cover legal costs and debts, he said. We can't afford to stay. I stared at the rosemary bush outside my window. That is your decision, I replied. We might move closer to her parents. I understand. There was something almost hollow in his tone now. They made us take financial responsibility classes, he added quietly, like teenagers. That might have helped earlier, I said, before I could stop myself. He didn't argue. I didn't think you'd let it go this far, he admitted again. That was your first mistake, I replied gently. The call ended without goodbye. That evening, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The same place everything had begun. I thought about the small calculations that had led here. The assumption that I was predictable, that I would absorb harm quietly to preserve peace, that my age meant weakness. They had miscalculated. Not because I am cruel, but because I am finished being convenient. My phone buzzed once more. Olivia. Dad says it's over. It's handled, I replied. A pause. Are you still coming to my recital next month? I felt something soften in my chest. Yes, I typed. I wouldn't miss it. 3 dots appeared. Then, okay. No drama. No accusation. Just okay. And for the first time in weeks, that felt like enough. The court hearing lasted 23 minutes. I know because I checked the clock when it began, and again when it ended. Daniel and Marissa stood side by side at the front of the room, not touching, not speaking. Just 2 adults facing consequences they once believed they could outmaneuver. When the judge read the charges aloud, fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation involving misuse of a minor's account, the words felt clinical, clean, stripped of emotion. Daniel kept his eyes forward. Marissa looked down. They both entered their plea, guilty. Hearing it spoken out loud did something strange inside me. It didn't bring satisfaction. It didn't bring triumph. It brought clarity. The judge outlined probation terms, restitution payments, mandatory financial oversight, counseling requirements. Strict conditions. 0 tolerance for further violations. Then she turned to me. Mrs. Whitmore, do you confirm that restitution arrangements are acceptable? Yes, I said. My voice did not shake. The gavel came down lightly. Just like that, it was over. Outside the courthouse, Daniel approached me slowly. Not with anger this time. Not with pressure. With something closer to humility. I signed everything, he said quietly. I know. I'll pay it back. Yes. There was a long pause between us. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it, he said one last time. That, I replied, was the problem. Marissa stayed a few steps behind him. She didn't speak to me. She didn't need to. Some conversations don't require repetition. As I walked down the courthouse steps, the air felt lighter than it had in weeks. Not because I had won, but because I had refused to lose myself quietly. They moved out 2 months later. The house down the street went dark, then was sold to a young couple with a golden retriever and loud music on Saturdays. Life replaced life. That's how neighborhoods work. Olivia still calls me. Not every day. Not even every week. But enough. I attended her recital. She didn't mention the case. Neither did I. Some things don't need to be dissected to be understood. The restitution payments began arriving on schedule. Small amounts, automated, impersonal. Each one a reminder that actions leave trails. And I returned to my routine. Morning tea, rosemary trimming, occasional cardamom rolls on Thursdays. But something fundamental had shifted. I am still a grandmother, still 74, still living in the same house with the same chipped Wedgwood cup. But I am no longer the quiet solution to someone else's problem. The last restitution payment cleared 6 months later. I marked it in my burgundy notebook, and then I closed it. Sometimes standing up for yourself costs comfort. Sometimes it costs relationships. I won't tell you whether Eleanor was right or wrong. But silence isn't always kindness. If this story stayed with you, leave a like, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more.